Good evening and welcome members, officers and those members of the public here at the meeting and those joining us virtually. We'll start the agenda with item 1, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. So apologies received from Councillor Lauren Bright, Councillor Ford, Keppel, Hodgson, Shepherd and Whittaker.
Thank you, Kirsty. Moving on to item 2, council minutes. I just have to say before we take a vote on the minutes, those on the agenda, I must inform you that a clerical error has been made and that the minutes from the 9th of September's full council meeting have been missed out from the agenda. And these will be presented at the next full council meeting. I apologise for that, but these things happen from time to time. So the first set of minutes is the extraordinary meeting which held on the 14th of October. Take those first. I'll run through them page at a time. So page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
I'll move those, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Second.
Thank you. They've been proposed and seconded. On a show of hands, all in support, please. Next. Abstentions.
Chair, that's 26 for and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. And we're moving on to the 4th of November. And I'll take them page at a time for page 1. Councillor Dunn.
2 typos. One is chair is spelt wrong under apologies for absence, and the other one is therefore no vote was taken, but it says not.
Nice to see someone's read them. Thank you. Page 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that proposal. Seconded by Councillor. All in favour, please show. Against? And abstentions?
26 for and 2 abstentions, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on, item 3, the action list. There are no outstanding actions. Item 4, public contributions. There are no public contributions. Item 5, declarations of interest. Well, you all know the score there, councillors. Consent agreement between items part 1 and part 2. There are no part 2 items. Item 7, correspondence brought forward by the chair. I've only got one item. I'm sure you all will join me in wishing Councillor Hodgson a speedy recovery, and during her recent out of illness, she's now out of hospital at home, and certainly send her all our best wishes. So I say that on behalf of everyone. So thank you for that. Okay, moving on to item 8, the Gambling Act Statement of Purpose, pages 20 to 64 on your agenda. Chris Parkhurst, lead licensing officer, can present the report. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. The purpose of the report is to seek approval for a revised Gambling Act Statement of Principles. There is a legal requirement for the council to have a statement of principles. There is also a legal requirement for that statement to be reviewed every 3 years. The statement has been through a formal consultation process and was reviewed and approved by the licensing committee on the 11th of September of this year. The revised statement is included in the appendix to the report. It should be noted that there's currently an ongoing review nationally of the Gambling Act. A gambling white paper was published, and this is going through a series of consultations and review before it will be reviewed by Parliament. There's a slight delay with the change in government. Unfortunately, that means the timing of the review does not align with our requirement to review this policy, so there have only been minor changes to the policy at this stage. We may need to bring this policy back before the next 3-year review, should there be any national changes that we need to make. But as it stands, the current policy is here provided for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Bright, you have your hand up there?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to propose this, so we accept it. I mean, the licensing committee has looked through it, and we did pick up on one particular aspect, which was essentially almost like a gambling lobby group trying to change the policy, which we kind of reverted back to what we already had, but other than that, it's fairly straightforward.
Councillor,
I'll second it, I'll second it.
okay, it's been proposed and been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to item 9 is the mid-year review of treasury management, pages 65 to 74. Section 151 officer. We've not been, Hudson is going to present the report. Over to you, Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. So there are 3 occasions in the year when treasury management is brought back to the council. And this is the occasion when we look at the operation of the in-year policy. And we see that, just as a reminder, that's attached as Annex A. The reason why it's reported on 3 occasions is there are inherent risks to the management of cash. So we'd like to ensure that everyone is as informed as possible. But we can reassure you all that we're not breaching any prudential indicators. We're complying with the policy. And we also provide details on anticipated returns for the year. So even though interest rates are slightly lower than this time last year, we're still looking at returns of over £1 million from cash. So that would be really handy. And of course, the other key issue to remember when talking about the operation of our management of cash in year is that very recently at full council, there were the recent capital changes for leisure services. So that will have an impact in terms of both the increased draw from reserves and the additional borrowing that was put into the capital programme. So that doesn't change, that doesn't breach the policies or prudential indicators or anything like that, but it is an important part of keeping you informed as to how cash is going to be managed over in the current year and in the future. So thank you, Chair. Those are the key points.
Councillor Haynes?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just querying our investments. We've got most of our investments, all of our investments except for ethical, into Goldman Sachs Bank. Just wondering why we have such a short spread, really. Also, in terms of ethical banking, Goldman Sachs has had quite a number of cases and queries and controversies involving insider trading, commodity price manipulation, stock price manipulation, various other questionable entries into the market. Also, back about 10 years ago, there was some concern about the charitable arm of Goldman Sachs investing in illegal settlements in the West Bank. Given these, I wonder why we have such an investment in this particular institution. Perhaps we could.
Would you like to answer that one, Gordon?
Yeah.
If you have an answer.
Well, thank you, Chair. Well, we operate the policy. So if at the time we have cash available, and they're offering the best returns for the period that we look to invest for, then that's the bank we work with. I mean, currently the policy is quite restrictive in the sense that historically the council has taken a very risk-averse approach to the management of cash. So it's a relatively limited number of very large institutions that we lend to. So it's not, we don't access a huge market. It's just those very large institutions that you'll be familiar with that we invest with. So the reason why I invest so much with Goldman Sachs is because they offer the best returns for the periods that we're looking to invest for.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Well, given the principle of spreading risk, even the biggest banks can fall. So, why is it not possible to have to look into other alternative investment outlets? Goldman Sachs, as you say, is not the only bank. I still don't quite understand why, despite the rates being favourable, why we don't, on the principle of spreading risk, look at other banks as well.
Well, the policy does limit our exposure to individual financial institutions, so there are limits according to how much we can invest with any one institution. And it just so happens that we're still within those limits at the moment. I mean, when the policy is set for 25-26, we can relook at those. But already, of course, we're fishing in quite a small pond because of the way we establish our policy.
Thank you. Well, when you look at the investments at the later date, I hope that we'll have that opportunity to discuss it further, short of me proposing a resolution. Thank you.
No, that's what's gonna make me, yeah, we're just noting that, so thank you, Gordon, for that. Yes, yeah, so moving on now to item 10 is the local council tax reduction scheme, 25-26, pages 75 to 78. What would you again, Gordon?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this paper establishes how we want our local council tax reduction scheme to operate in the next financial year. As you will note from previous years, the area of discretion is the extent to which we have lifted our bands by. And so the choice fundamentally is between either inflation or the increase in the national living minimum wage. And the option being recommended to you tonight is the larger increase, which is the increase based upon the 6.7% increase of the national living minimum wage. So that will mean more people get a higher level of support and more reductions in their council tax payments. So just to remind you all, this only covers those of working age. There is a different scheme entirely that's established from central government for those who are retired. But this is fundamentally a continuation of the policy that's in place for the current financial year, but with some increases for the increase in national living wage. And the report does dictate how much it will cost precepting authorities and how much it will cost college as a result of the change. Thank you, Chair.
Simon, Councillor Newton?
Thank you, Chair. Since we moved last year onto the banding system, which therefore allows greater flexibility for individuals as their income, especially if they're on variable levels of income, stopping them having to reapply every time their income changed or moved within a certain band. So it makes it much more fluid. And the system is good, it works, and now it's been upgraded in line with the new minimum wage, and I propose that we accept. Yeah.
I'll second. Okay, if there are no other speakers, it's been proposed and seconded by Councillor Locke. All in favour, please show. And against? Abstentions?
Yes, 29 for and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 11, to consider the establishment of a reserves policy, pages 79 to 81. And again, to receive the report of Section 151 officer. So, there you go, Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this report is brought before you today as a result of a recommendation from the Internal Overview and Scrutiny Policy to establish a reserve policy which formally dictates parameters within which certain key reserves could operate. So at the moment, councillors will get information on reserves on a fairly regular basis. So within the quarterly budget reporting process, they'll have evidence of reserves. When the budget is set, there'll be specific consideration of reserves and I'm formally obliged to make an opinion as to the adequacy of reserves. But also when the accounts are set and when the outturn is produced, councillors will also see, we'll get details on reserves then. It's also the case that the operation of the reserves, as we operate, are currently described within financial regulations as well. So at the minute, you can see that councillors do have a good deal of oversight and there are good controls on restriction of reserves. So the argument then becomes, would there be additional benefits to formally setting the parameters of reserves? And this is assumed to operate mostly for general balances, but also for the budget stabilisation reserves. So at the moment, when we set the budget, we do formally state what our general balances are as a proportion of the net revenue budget. So you do get that information as a matter of course, and that was stated as 9%. But we could also take that further and state that it shouldn't go below 5%, or we should aim for a different level. And it's also the case that there have been concerns over the level of oversight for the budget stabilisation reserve. So even though that's a key reserve for maintaining financial stability, because that's the £1 million that we look to help tide us over while government funding models change. I still sort of thought, would there be additional benefits to actually formally dictating the parameters within that would operate? And the report is of the view that currently members already have a great deal of oversight, and the key moment to describe that level of reserve and whether it's adequate or not is as we set the budget. So at that point in time, there could be that extended debate with the council in terms of whether the movement in the reserve is at the right level and whether additional reserves should be put in. So thank you, Chair. The recommendation is that currently we've not looked to formally establish parameters that maintain practices broadly as they are at the moment.
Councillor James, you want to comment on that? I'm happy to move that recommendation, okay? Yes, ma'am.
Chair, thank you. In my capacity as Chair of ONS Internal, as Paul has said, we referred this and asked for this item to come before full council as a result of when we were scrutinising the budget in our budget special meeting at the beginning of the year. And what drew our attention and caught our eye in our role of scrutiny or oversight, and it's difficult to tell here, but that is a graph of the stabilisation budgetary reserve. And the only line on that is a white line that buries itself in the bottom right-hand corner in 2 years' time. That is our stabilisation reserve at the moment, and it is due to go on the last estimate, it'll be updated soon, but in 26, 27, that's it, gone. Because we are living off our stabilisation reserve in order to budget, to balance the books, of which, of course, we are legally obliged to provide a balanced budget. We are also custodians of taxpayer public money. That is quite different from, and I entirely respect the view of the chair and the lead member in this area, who's a successful businessman, and he looks at it from a business point of view, where he's spending his money and he can take high risks if he wants. We can't do that. Within our reserves, we have reserves where we put money aside each year for a project, capital reserves. We need to replace the bin fleet. So we are therefore collecting money year on year in a reserve. We'll find them. That's not quite as much as we need, but we are at least putting money there. And we have other elements of money which are, you can call it ring-fenced or designated or earmarked, doesn't matter what you call them, but they're put aside for a purpose and they've got a name attached to them. But we then have a more general reserve, which we call the budgetary stabilisation reserve, which is what we use, A, to help balance the budget, but secondly, is the emergency pool, catch net, if we have a drama that we can turn to. At the moment, And our concern, fellow councillors, is that there is nothing in the budget setting process that says what that reserve should be. And being flippant, I would suggest at the moment that that reserve at the moment is what's left when budget's been set. That, in our view, is not sound planning. And that there should be, and I'm not suggesting that now is the time to decide what or how we determine what that reserve should be. That needs another separate little exercise. But the principle that at the budget setting time, we should have a reserve and the budget should be set around that reserve. And we want to see whether it's a percentage or a sum of money or whatever there in that reserve. So we know next year we've got some money there. At the moment, we're just seeing right for this year, and next year, well, before long, there isn't going to be money. And of course, we're living in a bit of a false world at the moment, because we have been greatly helped by unforecast interest levels over the last few years, 2, 3 years, 4 years, which have brought great fortune to us that we hadn't based on. And also, just looking back to the COVID time especially, we received a lot of fees from government to administer government money and COVID money, etc., where we actually managed through prudent, especially on our officer side, prudent work, we actually managed to do a lot of that work without having to use those fees. And those fees were then able to go into the general pot. So we're not, in terms of cash flow, we're not actually entirely in the real world. So I would urge councillors, and it goes against the lead member or endorsed by the lead member and the officer's report in this case, I would say that we should expect that there is a reserve and that it is quantified by a sum or a percentage. We come around to that another time. And I think that is necessary. It's suggested in the report that that would restrict us. No, it wouldn't, not in any way. Because during the year, if we have a drama, we sit down here and we make a decision to break the rule we've set. But at least at the beginning of the year, as a principle, when we set our budget out, we have that amount of money, we plan for that amount of money to be in it. And on that basis, ladies and gentlemen, I would recommend that we do not accept the recommendation in this report, and we require that there be further work done to identify the parameters upon which a budget should be set. Thank you.
Young speakers, Richard James.
Sorry, Councillor Newton knows I disagree with that. It will be restrictive, because if you set a figure, that figure will be there, it will be set in the budget. And the idea, every time we have something going a little bit awry, we come before full council and change the goals that we've set. There are deeper issues as well with this. Most councils do not have a reserve policy other than as described by our 151 officer, and I trust the 151 officer to give me the right advice on that respect. We've also, under the last government, when we were told that we couldn't do 114 issues and say we're running out of money if we've already got money ring fenced as a reserve. So they were telling councils, you must use your reserves. And then on top of that, there is this issue that a lot of district councils have been worried if they keep money back and it goes unitary, or if it goes like we're going, which is CCA, is will that money then go into the melting pot and be used in other areas? And we do know some districts have used that money up to retain it within the area the money's come from. So I'm quite happy to support the recommendation. I think you're kept up to date all the time. We have the QBR and updates on where we are financially. And also looking at the other way, was we're doing some of the most advanced projects this council's ever done. We're looking at probably 50 odd million altogether. And if we suddenly find ourselves that all the money's not coming in on time, which isn't always the case, and we're short of a pound or two, if we get down to any set figure, we then have to hold the project up until we raise a pound or two. We have to have some flexibility on how we run this council when we're doing the Appledore project, the operations centre. And as we know that we will be getting up to the 20 million to develop other projects. So I just think I will take my advice from the 151 officer and from my experience dealing with other councils within Devon and other places. You have to be careful if you set a reserve policy. When we come to the budget discussion, there will be discussion about should there be some sort of figure, arbitrary figure. But if you set it as a policy, we'll tie in the hands of this council in the future. I will stick by the recommendation.
Bring the chief executive to speak, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I think just to make members a little clear, as your former Section 151 officer, so it isn't the case that there isn't any money available should there be any unforeseen catastrophe or any events during the year. The council does have a general reserve of, I think it's 1.1 million, which is set aside and is only kept for emergency situations. That's reviewed periodically. It's kept at a rate of between 5 and 10% of the council's net revenue budget. So that doesn't form part of your general budget considerations. So as Councillor James and Gordon set out earlier, when we start formulating the budget, which is the process already started, you've got a budget workshop in your diary for the 19th of December, we'll start looking at the expenditure, the income of the authority and the reserves of the authority. Then you'll have a report to your Community Resources Committee, which will set out the financial position of the council for next year and for the forthcoming 3 to 4 years. At that point, we'll review the level or overall level of reserves, and within that report, Gordon's required, as he said, to set his determination as to whether the levels of reserve are sufficient and adequate for the council to continue its operations. At that point, members of that Community Resources can recommend that it should be higher or lower. And equally, once that goes to internal review scrutiny, they will have the same level of information for their consideration and therefore can make a recommendation as to whether to hold higher or lower levels of unring-fenced reserves. And then obviously that will come to full council for final consideration. So if you set a reserve policy today or a level, that could change at the next committee meeting anyway, depending on your views. So it's dealt with on an annual basis through 3 levels of reporting, 2 committees and full council. So as Gordon said, there's adequate provision for all members to have input into that review on an annual basis.
David Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I agree with the points that Councillor James has made. I think I've belonged to several organisations, public ones over many years, and the ones that have had reserve, they tend to become sacred cows. You know, you mustn't touch it. Oh, it's in the reserve. You must keep it there all the time. And the other argument against it really is we're a poor authority, a poor area. You know, it weakens our case, as it did when I was on the governors of Bedford College, if you had reserves, because they would say, well, you know, you don't need the money, do you? You've got reserves. And it does weaken our situation. I don't think in the situation we're in at the moment economically, I don't think we're in a position to put money aside for reserves. It's going to mean anything. It's going to be a reasonable amount of money. It's going to come from somewhere. It's going to come from one of the other budgets somewhere in order to put it in a cocoa tin. So I think at this moment in time, certainly we're not in a position to do it.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Councillor James proposed, I'll second that proposal. And I agree absolutely with Councillor Brenton.
Oh,
sorry, James. Earmark reserves are one thing, and we all recognise earmark reserves are necessary for the various budget headings that we have. As the chief exec says, we do have a general reserve in any event. I always think a reserve, certainly that level we've got, I would have thought is sufficient for this council the size we are. And I always look on a general reserve or a pot of money like that as dead money. We're asking ratepayers, and we're all ratepayers as well, to pot up every year, use it as an increase in the rate, increase in the council tax. Quite necessarily, usually, or always necessarily. But to put money, I think as Councillor Bentley just said, aside, and it sits there doing nothing, especially in an area like Turry, which is a very poor area. And the other thing is, it is we do monitor them, but I mean, we've got a very good system. Gordon's outlined it, and the chief exec of monitoring our budget throughout the year. The quarter reviews are well monitored, and we all get them in a simple form now, thank goodness. Even I can understand them now. So I'm seconding the proposal that we don't have a formal policy, and it might be reviewed in the future, but that's my position.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor, did you want to go back on that? Raise your hand up earlier.
I did, thank you, Chair, yeah. Fine, I have represented the views of ONS committee from earlier in the year. I stand by those views, but I also respect other people's comments on it.
Okay, Ruth Bean, sorry, someone else?
Councillor Craigie.
Yeah. Councillor Craig.
I just wanted to second councillor Newton's proposal.
Councillor Leathers.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that was proposed by councillor James, seconded by councillor Leather, that we, the recommendation is that we do not look to establish a formal reserves policy. All in favour of that, please show. And against? Any abstentions?
That's 27, 4 and 3 against, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, moving on then to item 12 on your agenda, is the potential tax base for 25-26, stages 82 to 85. Now you've each had a sheet tabled this evening, so you've got the information there. Yeah. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillor. So this is an opportunity, it's an important part of the budget levy process. It's the point where the council tax base for the year gets set. And in very simple terms, the council tax base is the estimate of the number of properties in College from one year to the next. But of course, there's a number of changes that take place from year to year. It isn't just a case of new houses being built. It can also be houses being split into two. But it's also changes as a result of the operation of policy. So that we know, for example, because of previous council decisions, that there were changes around second homeowners. And so when you look at the changes from year to year, you'll notice that a significant portion of those are actually related to now second homeowners. So that reflects the 100% premium that will be in operation as from the 1st of April. So when you look in the reports, there are some very large increases. There's an increase of 1,200 houses from one year to the next. That doesn't really mean those 1,200 new houses. It just means, of course, that the way the council tax base is calculated produces this large increase for the reasons outlined. Yeah, so this is important. So once this can be agreed, it's a relatively technical paper. There are some estimates and assumptions within it, but it's essentially a statement of facts. And the reason why it comes to you so late in the day is because we try and get the most up-to-date information. So once this has been agreed, we can pass that on to the preceptors, who also recollect council tax on their behalf, and it's an important step in our council tax and budget setting process as well. Thank you, Chair.
Mad rush to go to Lundy then.
I'll second that from the chair. Any? Councillor James proposal.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Brennan?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the last paragraph, just before the conclusion. The CNR meeting is on the 20th of January. There's a right of a call-in, and if the call-in should take place, you will be beyond the 31st of January time that call-in is heard. Is there a risk to the procedure here is what I'm asking?
Well, apparently you don't call it in, you can't call it in if it's at full council.
It's a CNR meeting, isn't it? You're talking about there on the 20th of January, 25?
Yeah. The next CNR meeting on the January the 20th.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair, I may have misunderstood it, but just thinking about the scrutiny principle, you've got 5 working days as a scrutiny to call in, and then it's going to be heard by full council usually.
Just bring the chief executive.
Sometimes the council tax base can be taken to a CNR committee. It can be delegated, but because of the deadlines in place, obviously we need to get this information out to the precepted authorities, which is why it's direct to full council.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Andrews?
I noticed that you've got banding appeals as one of the reasons why things change. How long does?
Sorry, I can't quite hear you. Can you stand up, please?
Sorry.
And then
I noticed on this in section 2, banding appeals. I just wondered, as a matter of curiosity, how long does a banding appeal take?
Oh, a long time.
a long time apparently. But
How long?
Try a couple of years for starters.
Banding appeals are dealt with by the valuation office agency, so any appeals dealt with by them, so it varies and it'll depend on the complexity of the appeal.
But what sort of time?
6 months, 12 months? You know.
I've got some on the go in my ward at the moment, and they've been on the go for over a year at least
Yeah,
with
I've
the
got
VOA.
somebody who's been on the go for over 2 years. That's
Yeah.
about
Oh, yeah.
that's
Quite standard.
But it's backdated.
I've lost my thought. Who proposed it? Councillor James proposed it. I seconded it. All in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions?
Unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous. Well done. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 13, the government of a combined council authority funding for the Appleton Maritime Innovation Centre, ages 86 to 89. And Sean is going to present this.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This report, the purpose of the report is to seek your approval to add £1.08 million to the capital programme for delivery of slipway improvements at the Waterloo Maritime Innovation Centre. So as the report explains, earlier in the year, as a precursor to the emerging combined county authority, Devon County Council announced the Net Zero Capital Programme funding from MHCLG. We were given fairly short term turnarounds to get applications into them, and we applied for the 2 eligible schemes that we had sufficiently worked up, that being some early stage development for the Holsworthy agribusiness land and the slipway scheme that's in front of you. The slipway scheme was approved and has come forward, and we've been made the offer of £1.08 million to deliver that. We didn't have to put any match funding in for that, so it's 100% funding a particular part of the project, and this doesn't replace any funding that's in the original ACMEX scheme, so it's additional money. Now, the one thing you should note is there's a quick turnaround on completing it. It needs to be done by the 31st of March next year. We're currently in discussions with County Council about flexibilities around that date and spend profiles, but that just leads us to the recommendation, Chair, that we add these funds to the capital programme and deliver the slipway improvements. Thank you.
Win-win to me. Happy to approve the recommendation. Proposed by Councillor James, your second. Councillor Haynes. Councillor Haynes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, can I just clarify where this, is it the slipway opposite South Road?
Yes, I believe it's the existing slipway that's there now. That's in a dreadful state and will be upgraded and made to the point where it'll be hopefully widely used.
Yeah, can you remind me, were we given the opportunity to look at this, or was it purely a officer's decision to go for this money?
Well, I think as Sean said, it's a very limited timescale, but please
Yeah,
answer that, Sean.
Yeah, in an ideal world, we'd have had more time, but we didn't have time. What we've had done is a Port and Harbour study that looked at the facilities that we have available. And one of the recommendations of that was that the effectiveness of the Appledore project would be greatly enhanced if access to the river was improved at that site. And so this was a logical extension to that project that would have been within scope had we had that ability earlier on in the ACMIC project development. So the answer was no, it wasn't brought in front of you. It was an opportunity that we've taken to do that, and it's in front of you now. That's right.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it seems a very large amount of money. Can you just sort of indicate what it's, you know, how it's broken down? Presumably we got an estimate for the work. I mean, is it surfacing and making the walls safe and things like that?
Yeah, I don't have a breakdown of the cost in front of me, Councillor Haynes, but yes, it's exactly those things. It's additional surfacing, it's stabilisation of the walls on both sides of the slipway. It extends the slipway slightly, takes the corner of the wall out and extends access to it. It actually creates an access from the Appledore Clean Maritime Innovation Centre down there onto the slipway. So it greatly enhances the access, but I can't give you a breakdown of it.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to go on. I think you mentioned recreation as part of the scheme. Does that mean that there will be jet skis launching from there, do you think, or purely what sort of recreation do you envisage?
Well, it's a public slipway as it currently stands. There are no regulations associated with it. People can come and use it as they wish, and I expect that to continue. I mean, we can probably put some monitoring in place, but I'm loath to open that debate again, having had it a few years back, and it turned into a bit of a problem for us. So potentially slipways could be launched from that slipway.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Well, I hope we can address it a bit later, bearing in mind the residents' concerns about the demolition process that went on a few months ago. So noise is quite a consideration, so I think we need to look at that later.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Councillor Tinsley first, I believe.
Yes, thanks for this. I think it's great that we've got a bit of extra money, and I think it, but you know, I really take the point that it will enhance the what we can offer at the Clean Maritime Centre. I think the short time scale for spending it is a real problem, and so I just wanted to ask, have you actually got a contractor commissioned or lined up? Can we actually spend it by the end of month?
So currently the way we're trying to break things down, we think we can spend most of the money within the time frame, but maybe not all of it. But we're trying to work on how we shorten our contractor approvals and how we might actually get some money out the door in an eligible and responsible way within that time frame. So the short answer is we hope that we'll be able to deliver this by the 31st of March. We certainly will be able to deliver most of it by the 31st of March, but we're in discussions with the county about flexibility on the date.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just very quickly, paragraph 1.1, I think there's a typo, year 2025. Yeah,
sorry.
I'm just proving I've read it. Yeah.
Obviously, there's an added benefit to this, because obviously the Maritime Centre will benefit from the slipway, but also, you know, the Anchor Park slipway will also benefit, because it'll take the pressure off of that. Because at peak times in the summer, that is really, really busy, and people are queuing up to get use of that slipway, and, you know, our tempers do flare sometimes, so I think it is win-win. So you proposed it, and Councillor Newton seconded that. Sorry, Councillor Tyler?
Yeah, just go back to that on that again, then going back when we had planning permission, right? Natural England were very concerned about the wading birds in the estuary. Has that been addressed? Because Natural England had a hold on 21 days after planning was passed. Has this got to go through planning now before it can be adopted?
I think it's already gone through planning.
No,
just in terms of the Natural England consideration.
Just come up with
So that, you're right, councillor, there was a delay in the decision is being
Yes, sir.
issued because of a calling provision within the Wildlife and Countryside Act. My understanding is that isn't then triggered again in terms of works being undertaken by the local authority. Natural England have said that just happened in terms of granting consent, so that provision wouldn't.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been proposed and seconded, all in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions?
29 for and 1 abstention, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, item 14, this is the Excellence Morocco UK Power Project. Development consent order, pages 90 to 97. And to receive
Chairman,
the plan manager.
Chair, to declare pecuniary interest.
Thank you.
I act for a number of the landowners.
Thank you.
Landowner affected by the cabling route.
Thank you. Okay, Helen, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So the report before you, as set out on the first page, the purpose is for you to consider the council's participation in the development consent order process, the Excellence Morocco UK Power Project. You will all be already aware of this project. There have been a series of ongoing briefings over, I think, what is now a 3-year period, since we first started engaging with Excellence at the pre-application stage. Full council did consider a report back in July of this year, which provided a draft consultation response to the statutory pre-application consultation that Excellence carried out, and also a proposal for a member working group to be established. Both of these were agreed, subject to group leaders considering the exact makeup of the member working group due to there being 2 conflicts of interest. The development consent order application has now been submitted. It was submitted to the planning inspector on the 21st of November, and it's currently within its 28-day period, whereby the planning inspectorate has to consider whether they accept it as an application or not. Forest Council have been consulted on and requested to provide an adequacy of consultation response. This has to be provided within a 14-day period, and it's specifically to comment on elements of the pre-application consultation, specifically around the applicant's duty to consult more widely, to consult with the local authority, and the duty to publicise. It's the 6th of December deadline for this, and it has been shared in draft with the member working group. The member working group met for the first time on the 28th of November, as we are now that it has been submitted, we are very much within the process now. The member working group meeting involved a briefing from our appointed solicitor, so this is an external solicitor who is an expert in development consent orders. We also discussed the adequacy of consultation process and sort of explain the need for the proposed delegations that are before you today. And it was also explained there will be a forward plan developed, which will look to time future member working group meetings in line with the development consent order timetable. So your recommendation at paragraph 5.1 is to consider and accept a proposed scheme of delegation for all stages of the process to delegate to the head of communities in place, but in consultation and engagement with the member working group. This is accepted the submission of the local impact report, which is one of the main submissions that as a local authority, as a host authority, we must submit to the planning inspectorate, and that will come before full council for agreement. As set out in the report, the key need for this scheme of delegation is to ensure efficient and effective working and responding to the development consent order. There will be a series of very tight timescales that we'll have to meet, some of which are as short as a 14-day period turnaround. And certainly during the examination, it's likely there will be a need to respond quickly on matters. And the terms of reference for the member working group do set out that expectation of officer and member working together to ensure that the views of members are heard. And that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rock?
Yeah, I mean, I attended the members' working group meeting, and it was very, very interesting and informative. And I don't think any of us realise how such a complicated and long-winded process this is going to be. So I'd like to thank the officers for all their hard work. One particular aspect I was pleased with, Xlinks have guaranteed us £250,000 for our officers' time, so that none other of our planning obligations or officers will, you know, slip by. So I would fully support the recommendations, and I propose we accept them.
Councillor David Brenton?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, on the working group, the minutes been published for that working group? Are they somewhere on the?
So the terms of reference sort of set out there, I don't believe it's minutes of that, there will be notes and working notes of those. I don't believe anything's been published, but notes were certainly taken at the meeting.
Well, therein lies the weakness of this scheme of delegation. I think this could be very significant for this area, and I don't think it should be left to a working group which doesn't have any legal authority at all to make decisions or put forward an opinion. They may have their own or whatever, but they don't have it, the council approval. CNR should be overseeing this. So it'll be minuted and we'll be able to question it. I know, I take the point about 14 days, that's not our problem. And you can have meetings, you know, within 5 working days. So it can be overcome if we need be. Now, some of you who were on the council before may recall when the Atlantic Array was being proposed, how complicated that was legally and all the rest of it. A lot of involvement there. And that didn't come to anything in the end, but nonetheless, there's a potential here for really controversial opinions or conflicts. And, you know, we've been down this road before, haven't we, where we've had a working group, things have been said here and somebody else said there, you know, nobody being accountable. We've got to make this tight. Personally, I feel there's a lot of problems ahead of this proposed scheme, even though we now have the ex-chair of Tesco in charge of it. And he's really for it and all the rest of it. So I don't know whether he thinks he's going to make a lot of money out of it. Obviously he is, you know, he can do it for nothing. But, you know, it's, you know, 2,000 miles of cabling. You know, as I've explained to some of you before, you know, my brother was in the Merchant Navy and he used to do cable laying and inspection. He thought it was a joke when I told him this. He said, do they know what they're doing? They've said in the report they're going to trench it. No, they won't. It's impossible. You can't trench all that all the way from Rockwell to here. Not at all possible. But nonetheless, you know, they're going to do it. And I do feel that we should have this as an accountable grouping. It could be a subcommittee even of CNR, but at least it must be under the auspices of CNR to make sure we do not go into that territory we've had before of rumor mongering and all the rest of it, because there will be a lot of money involved with this if it goes ahead and a lot of disruption. I mean, they talked about tunneling under the Biddeford-Torrington Road when they talked about the Atlantic Array. That went down a storm, that did, you know, all that, and plus all the trenching that's going to come up from the coast over to Alberdiscot. And of course, back in the day when Alberdiscot was done, they had to do a lot of road improvements there. That needs, you know, the people who are sitting on advising or, you know, being consulted on this have got to have some clout. They've got to be able to say, yes, I represent the council. We can, this is what we want and this is what we insist on. Not, oh, well, it's just my opinion and it really doesn't matter. So I can't support this.
I take the point you make, Councillor Brenton, and you know, there's some valid points there, but I'm looking for others for advice here, but you know, actually, they haven't come to ask for planning permission. This is you know, this is completely out of our hands. So whatever it is accidents are intending to do, they will do, irrespective of what we think, you know, by and large. So quite what impact CNR or any other larger group, larger committee could have in regard to this, you know, I'm at a loss to know. Sorry, you want to just come back on that first?
Certainly, add a little bit. Obviously, full council have already approved to set up that working group, as Kelly mentioned, on the 15th of July. So you're not delegating a decision to a working group, you're delegating a decision to an officer who is able to formulate that decision and post that decision back to Xlink in consultation with the working group that members approve at the July full council, subject to an update for the two members who have left the meeting because of their interest, having substitutes in place should group leaders decide that. Obviously, with a 14-day turnaround, that's 14 calendar days, and you put those decisions to CNI, you have to call that meeting. Obviously, those decisions don't become decisions until the 5-day period has passed. So if that decision is then called in for scrutiny, you won't make any submission at all in those circumstances. So those are the other things you need to bear in mind before reaching a decision.
Councillor Tinsley?
Yes. I think we'd all appreciate more information about what's going on. I think it probably will be very controversial, but it's also very technical. And I was really impressed with the report that you did, the initial report, feedback report that you did, because the expertise in that is far and away beyond what we members have. So I would just say, can we attend, those working group meetings be open to all of us? Can you publish the dates of those meetings so that we can attend and inform ourselves on the process as it's going along?
Yeah, please,
Yes, in response to that, Councillor Tinsley, so the committee report back in July included a terms of reference, and in terms of the operation of that working group, it does say the working group may seek attendance and engagement with other elected members, officers of the councils or other relative parties by invitation. So if you wanted that strengthening, that would be a matter for members to agree if you wanted that to be more open.
But that's a bit like all of our committee meetings. You may not get a vote on that meeting, but any councillor can attend any meeting. So, you have the information in front of you.
Yeah, and the operation, it also says the working group will routinely provide update reports to full council for appraisal of progress and activity, including any proposals and recommendations as considered appropriate and necessary. We did at the initial member working group meeting, just touching on the end, just to get views on what the wider membership can be kept up to date, and that's something I would expect the member working group to have further views on as well, as a sort of two-way process. So there is an element of provision that other members can be invited to those meetings, and indeed I would expect that the notes from those meetings could be made available as well.
Councillor Long,
yeah, looking at Stacey now then, I mean, what are the rules about, when we've got these working groups, why can't be published, general comments that were said at that meeting, so everyone is kept informed? Is there any rules that we can't for working groups?
No, in fact, generally with our working groups, we do publish the minutes, and we do publish the committee minutes as well, so they're available for all members to see. So there is no issue with doing that. Did Demon Services attend these?
Yeah,
so
the meeting only took place end of last week, so we have actually completed them.
so we can publish, we can have those minutes published in line with the rest of our working groups.
I'll take on board what Councillor Brent said, people should be informed, so I think that's the way forward.
Let's try not to labour this point too much, because as I said earlier, this is a decision which is outside of our hands anyway. It's going to happen. It's just a question of the best involvement that we can get. Councillor Mr. Brunton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm interested in the 5.1 bullet point 3 recommendations that delegate authority to the head of the community in place to permit the necessary officers to attend the preliminary meeting, hearings, and prepare and give evidence as required during examination of the delegate consent. Now, who monitors those that evidence? I mean, what is that evidence going to be? I mean, presumably it'd be positive or negative. I mean, evidence is a list of presumably facts that either go on one side or the other of a particular argument or something like that. So who's going to know what these officers are going to say? I mean, surely there could be more consent coming from the council about this. Because either it's going to be the head of communities and place or the necessary officers, whoever they are, and they're attending these very, very important preliminary meetings and giving evidence. So who is actually priming them about this evidence? Who's saying to them, let me see what the evidence you're going to give is? Who is going to be monitoring that in any way? I mean, I do think it is very important that we find out these situations, because generally speaking, such things as the reports on this type of committee or whatever is going to development consent order don't actually become public for a long time afterwards. Each time the council won't have any opportunity to at least know what's being said in its name. And I think that is a very important issue. I take your point, Chair, that there's nothing we can do about it. We're completely impotent, you know, this sort of thing and the other. But the fact of the matter is that the chief executive of this Xlink, the Jack Lewis, isn't it? The Tesco boss, he proudly claims in interviews he doesn't know anything about energy. He knows nothing about all this stuff that we're saying is terribly difficult for us. And of course it is, Councillor Timms is quite right. But we want to find out as much as we can, and we want to safeguard our interests. And then we've got somebody right at the top of the tree telling us, oh, he doesn't care that he's pigging women, presumably. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that some of us do care. We do care. We don't want to be ignorant. We want to know what's going on. And if officers from our council are giving evidence about this development consent order, we want to know what that evidence is. It's an important legal issue. Evidence is incredibly important. We should know the sort of evidence is going to be given on our behalf, because I don't want anything given on my behalf that I don't know about. Read the small print, please.
Let's bring Helen back in.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Benson. You see it's the second bullet point in the recommendation. That bullet point deals with the submission of various representations and throughout the stages. And you'll see in brackets it says excluding the submission of the local impact report. So it's intended that that document comes back before full council. With the timings of that, I think at the earliest, assuming that the DCO is accepted, we'd probably be looking sort of after Easter, early summer, when we have the preliminary meeting. Now, the local impact report is one of these, it's kind of the main submission to the examination, and that goes through all of the key issues. There's quite a standard format for a local impact report, but that's something that we've already started to pull together in terms of the contents and the template. And so that will set out where we consider there to be impacts or not, the extent of those impacts, and that will inform the position of the council at the examination. So what we set out at the examination follow on from that. So that document will come before full council, and also its evolution and development will involve the working group as well, and the notes of that would then be made available.
Chair, thank you. The councillors, we have been asked to give very basic delegation to our officers. In the Constitution, we have a section for delegation. It just doesn't cover development consent orders because we haven't had one of those before. But in everything else, we delegate on a daily basis to our officers, because without that, the place would just grind to a standstill. The chief executive is speaking to civil servants in Whitehall on a daily basis, probably, or in Exeter in County Council. It's everyday business, but it's there in the detail, Councillor Brenton. In that it says that the head of communities and place, in consultation with the working group. In other words, he can't and he won't let his dogs of war go on anybody else until he's actually spoken with members who are in the working group, who are the connection with us. Now, for goodness sake, let our officers get on and do our work that we are telling them to do in our strategy. They report back. We've heard that thousands of times that we get to see it.
Thank you, Councillor Newton.
And I second the motion as well.
Thank you. Councillor Piper first, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a general point, really, and I do take on board our impotence issues, obviously. But I think, very early on, there were some valid suggestions of community benefits with these large infrastructure projects. And I'm quite concerned that we never seem to be able to have those discussions or have that input, even though it seems very early to me. But it seemed that, in this case, we were sort of told that, well, landowner agreements are sewn up and we can't contemplate that type of thing. And I'm probably making the point because I'm thinking of the future. This is the first development consent order we've had to consider, but there might be many more. If things go well with the marine, clean maritime centre, we may have more of these. So I just want to make the point that I hope we can look at community benefits from these big schemes, which are going to bring disruption to our area, which are going to potentially have huge benefits nationally, but we don't seem to get those benefits locally, and we could do with them. You only have to look at the lack of taking on the opportunity of wind turbines and solar parks in our fields. The communities didn't get much out of them, probably not going to get much out of X-Links. So, if we can find a way that we can look at future large-scale projects and get something for our community, that would be great. Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Cobblepot, I'll leave the other hand up first.
Thank you. I was just wondering if we could get confirmation of who is on the member working group, please. And I would support the proposal if we include, as we've been saying, about more transparency, everyone knowing when the meetings are being held and the sharing of the notes or minutes following those groups.
Just first in Councillor Piper's point around the community benefit side of things, that doesn't feature in the request for delegation because it's something that is discretionary. So hence that's not included in the explicit bullet points at 5.1. The terms of reference for the working group do include a sub point which directs that they will inform the development of the council's position when it comes to any community benefit package, and our understanding is that X-Links is committed to providing community benefit package. However, we're waiting for that next stage of discussions at which point members would be involved in that and we would move that forward. In terms of membership of the group in response to Councillor Cobblepot, again, the terms of reference that were agreed back in July that the council suggested the following sort of composition of that group. So lead member for planning, lead member for economy, lead member for climate, and then the ward members from each of the ward within which the operational development would take place. So that's Monthly and Putford, Bideford, Two Rivers and Three Moors. And of course there are few councillors within that 8 who are conflicted.
And in addition, remember I said that any member is entitled to go along to any meeting, so everyone is effectively included. May not get the vote, but you can go to the meeting.
I'm just going to say, but we need to know when they are.
Absolutely. They will be published.
Yeah, we're just developing the forward plan because at the moment the DCA hasn't been accepted. So there's a 28-day period, and then we'll know if that time will definitely starting. It's also very much dictated by the planning inspectorate. So the meetings will look to fall in line with that timetable as it's presented to us to make sure that we can work as efficiently as possible to respond to deadlines.
So Mrs. Branton, I've got several speakers, so they're going to be as swift as you can.
It's interesting that Councillor Newton, having castigated us for taking the risk of not having the funds that he requires, is now completely at the other extreme, because the whole point of this is that it's unique and innovative. It's not business as usual. I mean, there's no implication on any of our officers because this hasn't happened before It's very novel. So you can't say, well, we've got an officer who's been doing this for 5 years or 10 years, or we employed him because of his expertise in this area. No, nobody has any experience about this, including the guy who's running the operation from the top, apparently. So the attitude we should take is that of due diligence and caution over this. We've got to do that, but at least we should know what's going on. And I understand, thank you, Cheryl, that now we'll be able to know when these meetings are, because those passed me by and I would have forgotten if I knew about them, so that we can just go and see what is going on at our council level. But the point is that things are being done in our name, and this is a whole new horizon. And we really don't know what the outcome will be. And to just have this gung-ho approach that the chief executive of running Exlead does, I think is not what we should be doing in terms of of our communities and our residents.
Thank you. Right, councillor Haynes, and now I'll take the vote.
Thank you, Chair. As a member of the group, we met a few days ago, and the community benefits issue is very much to the forefront of our discussions. I understand that Xlinks think of setting up a fund. I'm not sure whether you said that, really. The other thing is, in my recollection, is that we had the chance to input what we wanted as community benefits. I seem to remember we were asked to respond to Helen Smith in that respect. So I think we have been to that exercise, but there's still plenty of scope for us to say what we want.
Thank you. Right, who proposed it first? Who proposed it, councillor Rock, seconded by councillor Newton? Is it really pressing?
Well, the two members who had to walk out of this meeting because of the conflict of interest are on this member working group, and I just.
Oh, they're not.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
Oh, but you said lead member for the economy and the ward members.
But not those, because obviously they've excluded themselves, they've declared it.
So they're not on this.
They will be on.
Okay, because when Helen read out that these people were on that group.
Yes,
I
Steve,
thought-
you just reply.
Chair, that's the point we made earlier. So because they declared their interest, group leaders be delegated to name substitutes in their place, should you decide to.
Right. Can I just point out, I did raise this morning, and I can't remember it coming to group leaders to deal with the possible substitution. So I fully agree with you, we should know who they are and when the meetings take place. And my own disappointment this morning, I needed to raise it. So you will be advised. Yeah, but I would just make the point that what we're dealing with is the office of delegation, not the working group. I think we'll bring that on the group leaders meeting and have a discussion about that. But at the moment, we are discussing what we need to discuss, which is delegation to the head of place and people in place. And also for the constitution to be updated to reflect that change. It's being proposed, being seconded, hands up, all in support, please. Against? Abstentions?
That's 25 for, 2 against and 1 abstention, Chair.
Thank you. Right, moving swiftly on items. Oh. Yeah, you have said so. Okay, moving on to item 15, draft housing strategy, pages 98 to 136. On the agenda, and to receive the report of the planning manager. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you. As you'll see, I've been joined by Phil Gilbert, who is part of the wider team that's been working on this. He will be available to answer questions. I've just given a very, very sort of high level introduction. As you can see on your agenda report, the purpose of this item is to consider the draft housing strategy and proposal for it to be subject to a period of public consultation to inform its further development. As you know, your strategic plan sets this as a priority, so the development of a housing strategy. Just in terms of a bit of a timeline, a workshop took place on the 15th of August. There has since that time been ongoing lead member engagement with lead member on housing. There was an update to leadership on the 15th of October on progress with the report and its structure and content. A draft of the housing strategy in a different form to what's on today was circulated to all members on the 16th of November, and there was a further discussion to which all members were invited on the 19th of November. So across that feedback session on the 19th of November, and also in response to the circulation of the draft, we received various helpful comments back, both in terms of written responses by email, but also verbal responses on the 19th of November. So the version that is attached at Appendix 1 to your report today is a reflection of those discussions and comments and seeks to capture the key issues that have been raised by you as council members. It is a first draft, we just emphasise that. It's a starting point, it seeks to capture the issues you've raised. It's likely the final version will look different, it can be formatted differently with sort of additional photos and images. The recommendation is that it be subject to an 8-week period of consultation if that's agreed this evening. With the idea being to target a wide range of stakeholders and the wider general public, and for that consultation to be supported by a questionnaire and sort of guide responses linked to the key issues raised. And members, it would be open to members to make further comments as well during that consultation period. Once the consultation period is ended, if it's agreed tonight, officers would prepare a feedback report, and there would most likely then be a further workshop to look at those comments and just see how it should be further shaped into its final form. It is intended for a final draft at such a stage as that is prepared to come before full council for approval. And then after that, a development plan would be developed, which would set out the key actions to deliver the aims and the objectives that are set out. The recommendation is set out at paragraph 5.1 of the report. Thank you.
Councillor James, do you have a comment?
Yeah, obviously, Councillor Hodgson would have much preferred to have been here this evening to present this and present the recommendations. She has put an enormous amount of work into this, and ended up in hospital. But I would like to propose the recommendations. It is the first, I get confused about the first draft and the pre-draft, but it's going out for consultation. We can all add to that consultation. We will all get a chance when it comes back, and it's been the various replies to the consultation. So what we're doing tonight is just really getting it out there, get the consultation out there, so we can move it on after Christmas when the information starts, well, into the new year, when the information comes back. So I'm happy to, on behalf of Councillor Hodgson, to do these recommendations and just keep moving this process forward. Thank you.
Okay, we're seconder. One of you had your hand on, what was talking the same time? Councillor Piper, I think it was.
Well, I am happy to second it. I think it.
Are you all going to speak? Sorry.
So I am going to speak, because I am happy to second it. I just wanted to highlight that section 4, challenges and opportunities. I read that section and it's challenges really, unfortunately. So, at this stage, the opportunities, I'm not saying there aren't opportunities highlighted in the strategy. I think there are. I think we've all discussed them. I think we've all got ideas on what things need addressing. And I think it is a good starting point. It'll be interesting to see what consultation comes back, but happy to second moving forward, as Councillor James says. But I did think that section 4 perhaps may just need to be titled challenges.
Okay, it's been seconded. All in favour, please show.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on, item 16, to answer the questions submitted under procedure rule A9. We have no questions tonight. Item 17, petitions. We have no petitions. Leads us on to notices of motion, and we have two notices of motion. And the first one is from Councillor Tinsley. If you'd like to briefly present your report, we've all got a copy of it, so
Yes, on the 12th of November, the BBC reported that Bideford Post Office was on a list of 115 threatened with closure as part of a radical shake-up of the business. These 115 are the only ones left which are wholly owned by the Post Office and have staff employed by the business. The rest are franchises based in other shops like WH Smith in Barnstaple. And I don't think we should be complacent about franchising. Their services tend to be more restricted, opening hours often shorter, and the continuity of service is more precarious. When Wadebridge Post Office was franchised, it moved to Smith's, then to the Spa, then to another newsagent. Then there was no service at all for months, and now it's in temporary accommodation waiting for another solution. And the same thing happened in Torrington a couple of years ago. The Post Office corporate website says that post offices are an anchor to the high street, a bridge between the online and offline economy. That's absolutely true, isn't it? Here in particular, a vital lifeline, and they drive footfall to the high street. And I think we all agree with that. Our post office brings people into the centre of town. It offers a full range of services used not just by Bideford residents, but by people from across the district. And that bridge between the online and the offline economy is really important for older and more vulnerable residents of this community. We've had bank closures, and since then, post office banking services have become even more important for local businesses to pay in cash at the end of the day. People have commented what great staff are employed in our post office. They're friendly and patient and helpful. They're people who stand to lose their jobs. It's always well used. Whenever you go in there, there's a queue. And if it closes or moves, we get another empty building in a strategic location. And also it may well undermine the Royal Mail sorting office. Will that then follow? Now, I'm a member of Bideford Regeneration Board. And what are the key objectives on our agenda? Increasing footfall in the town centre, supporting businesses, and finding solutions for empty premises.
Councillor.
I'm finishing. This takes us backwards. It's a kick in the teeth for regeneration. The business decision is going to be made a long way away from us, but I do think that the council should make the case to the government and to the PO bosses that it makes no sense, on the one hand, to be offered potentially millions of pounds in levelling up funding.
Please.
If vital services are taken away with the other. So I hope members will support my motion.
I'm sure you'll get plenty of seconds. So it's been proposed that we write to the post office, Councillor Kinsey said, seconded by?
Second.
All in favour, please show your support. I'm very surprised if it isn't unanimous.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And the next notice of motion is from Councillor Branton. Again, you've got your 3 minutes. You don't have to use 3 minutes, but you have to.
Can't speak very quickly. Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm sure everybody's aware of the vandalism that occurred down in Victoria Park quite recently. Traditionally, this is a time we think about our young children. The playgrounds in Victoria Park have provided a source of enjoyment and healthy exercise for generations of youngsters. The recent appalling, depraved vandalism, because it was absolutely disgusting, some of it, is shocking evidence of how little even children are being, how even little children are being targeted in mindless and senseless acts. The horrible tragedy at Southport reminds us that innocent young children are being targeted, and this is due to child abuse and child pornography, particularly on social media. And even dedicated children's spaces now need protection in a way they didn't in the past. This is an action well worth taking to install better CCTV, which includes the children's play areas. Yet CCTV in Victoria Park is only focused on the football pitch. Now, and it was clear from the Community Safety Partnership meeting that was held recently that these cameras do not properly, if at all, cover the children's play area, and they do not work effectively at night, if at all. So surely our priority should be the safety of our children, not whether footballers are offside. Having spoken to parents at the time that I looked at the situation, it was clear that they thought the play areas did have CCTV, and they were worried about their children's safety now that they know that they don't. And we have all just endorsed the play zones philosophy on the 14th of October as part of the health and wellbeing strategy. And there has been a major investment in those particular playgrounds that I'm speaking about. So let's waste all that effort. We need CCTV in the children's playground at Victoria Park. And to bring it down to a more basic common denominator, there has just been a great deal of money spent upgrading that children's play area, a huge amount of money. We must protect that as well. But of course, that isn't my top priority. My top priority is to stop our little children having their play spaces vandalised and their health and safety put in danger, because if people don't realise that this vandalism has occurred, or the horrible stuff that was done recently, and it was disgusting and depraved, our little children will be damaged. And how can any of us want that for their children?
Thank you, Councillor Brenda. I don't think many people will disagree with your sentiments, but just for the record, there is CCTV within the vicinity of the play zone area, and that mindful damage that you referred to was recorded on CCTV, and the police, from what I can gather, have identified the use that actually threw all that paint around and damaged various things. The main issue I think we were talking about here is the clarity of the images and whether they are actually fit for purpose when it comes to a court case. But your principle is exactly right.
Because that was a discussion at the community safety.
So this
wasn't good enough, and it didn't operate in the dark.
So this will go to whichever committee.
Point of order, yes, point of order, what committee will it go to, please, Chair?
Yeah, we did have a second, was it?
Yeah, I was
Great. Councillor Hannigan, second, yeah. Next, I'm gonna go to.
Chair, I mentioned earlier, you've got a all-member budget workshop in your diaries for Thursday, the 19th of December, where we'll be discussing the budget and the capital programme. And anything from that would go as part of the budget process to CNR through the internal overview scrutiny process before coming to full council.
I understand that Richard Hayes is currently carrying out a review of the CCTV in general, but sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, Chair, I just had a technical point again. Would this then be scored as a PID in competition with the other PIDs, which will come up as part of that process, or is the suggestion that it's been taken up a standalone?
Well, I presume it would be scored in the same way as all those are.
Because the request is for PID.
There's only so much money, man.
Yeah.
Okay, was proposed by Councillor Andy Brenton, seconded, so. Councillor Hannigan had signed up just before. Just you did that. All those in favour, please show.
You're still voting in favour, Paul.
Unanimous, Chair.
Again, with a little bit of pressure, just 1 minute later clock, so thank you everyone.